We'll start the third budget workshop off tonight. I'm Deputy Mayor Steve Herman. I'd like to welcome everybody who might be listening out on TV land and on the radio. As you can see, we're kind of short-staffed tonight here as a council. I think we're definitely outnumbered by city staff tonight, which is nice to see them here in our capital improvement budget workshop. But just to inform those that might be watching on TV and listening on the radio, the mayor is out with a minor medical procedure, but he is watching on TV and has the city manager's phone number on speed dial, so if he has any questions, he'll be calling the city manager. So don't turn your phone off, Mark. And council member Cummings is in South Carolina, I believe. Georgia. On a Neighbor Works project, doing some, as he said, city business, working with other neighborhood works associations. And council member Tom Peck is delayed due to issues at his work. So we'll move forward with the third budget workshop dealing with the capital improvement budget. I will turn it over to the city manager to kick us off tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. First of all, there was one budget that we neglected to go through, operating budget that we neglected to go through, fell through the cracks. I thought it was covered under the first work session, and then we didn't cover it in the second work session. That is the unclassified budget. It's on page 29, and this budget accounts for some very general fund expenditures that aren't part of any specific department or division. It is under my direction, but it was in the administrative area, and I neglected to go over it. The details are on page 30, and it covers a variety of things, such as unemployment compensation, any payments we have to make related to unemployment claims, uncollectible accounts. I think that's where it got me confused, because Mr. Noakes did talk about uncollectible accounts when we were discussing the ambulance service, because most of our uncollectible accounts have to do with the ambulance. Employee benefit fees, anything we have to pay related to that. Patriotic celebrations, our share of the 4th of July and things of that nature. We have adjustment of salaries in there. That has to do with this year, 2013, it had to do with the 1% pay performance that ultimately got turned into a 1% across the board for non-represented employees. And for next year, it's the paper performance program is budgeted in this general account. Other unclassified expenses, primarily legal costs of specialty type of professional services, primarily legal costs that are directed by the city attorney. Examples of that include the Buckstaff property. It doesn't include, there was the issue about the phosphorus issue with the utilities. That actually gets charged to the utilities. This is not, however, anything to do with labor relations or any type of personnel-related expenses, but we've had a number of those things. Then there's a mobile trailer tax, again, something that we have to pay. And then the industrial development's been moved into the economic development program. So the budget for 2013 was $887,700. The proposed budget is $850,000. We are going to be under budget, although you have to take a look at the different line items because it really is kind of misleading. The $200,000, even though it shows that we're technically under budget by about $50,000, we're actually more like $150,000 over. It's just spread through the departments. You recall that council had approved a 1% across the board adjustment, as well as some changes to the personnel costs in police and fire to take care of some wage compression issues. So that was actually distributed throughout the department. So it was budgeted here, but it's actually been spent elsewhere. The $150,000, the adjustment of salaries, will likely reallocate that to the departments once we know what the allocation is. But those funds have been spent. So technically, this account is probably more over like $150,000. The reason for that is primarily uncollectible accounts. And this was the last year of the old contract we had, and the old contract we had for collection under SGS. That was a company based out of Dallas. They've actually gone out of business. And when we hired the new firm, LifeQuest, they agreed to assist us in collecting those old accounts, and this is the final year in which they're collecting before they write them off, so they're writing a number of those off. We believe that we'll go back to the 475. That's a pretty normal number for our ambulance service. Happy to answer any questions with that regarding any of those expenditures. If other staff need to come up, I can ask them to come up as well.
Just maybe a little more of a clarification on the uncollectible accounts. I've been asked several times by citizens, how long of a time frame are we mandated by like state statute or our own ordinance to, do we give them 2, 3, 4 years to try to collect those accounts and then we write them off? I mean, are we mandated by some type, or could we conceivably, they could be out there for 10, 15 years if we wanted to?
I think it's, at least when I was here before, it's more of a recommendation from our auditors.
Okay.
Value on the books. So, we still have a record of them, but we officially write them off.
And we can't tie, property taxes or anything to any of those uncollectible accounts? Because most of them, like you said, ambulance service, so either they're paid for by insurance accounts, or if the person is deceased and, that they've gone through probate and everything's gone.
Yeah.
Can't collect after that.
No, these are areas where we just flat out can't collect. We can't put it on property tax bills. This isn't something that is allowed under property taxes. But the collection agency uses a lot of different ways to do it. But they generally, these are ones that they've deemed uncollectible.
And just one other question on that part. I know that when a home goes into foreclosure and all those types of things, the county actually pays us the property taxes. But someone that owes the city property taxes or other taxes or other unpaid bills, where does that show up in our budget? And how aggressive do we go after those types of people? I know once a year, I think the Northwestern kind of puts the top 10 out there who haven't paid their property taxes and things like that.
Unpaid property taxes essentially become the responsibility of the county to collect
Okay.
once they become delinquent. They don't, whenever there's any type of credit, periodically the council approves some adjustment in properties based on errors, or if somebody sues over an unfair assessment to their belief, and we either settle or get it adjudicated, that goes as a credit, or it goes as a charge against our property tax revenue account, as opposed to this.
Okay.
Just how it's accounted for. I don't think, Ed, if that goes anywhere else, if property tax write-offs, they don't go in here, do they?
I think there are some where they were rescinded in here.
Do they go in here, or do they go into another account?
I think in looking at this, there were some in here.
Oh, okay, excuse me. Okay, so there are, they would show up in here, but they're dwarfed by the ambulance and collectibles.
Any other questions for Councilman? Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Roloff, the $150,000 that's proposed for the adjustment of salaries, you explained some of the ways that those have been used the past 2 years. Are there wage compression issues that we're anticipating in other areas in 2014? Or I guess are there areas that we're anticipating? Because we certainly, through the last 2 budget workshops, have talked a lot about salaries and a lot about some of the increases that we're going to be getting. I guess I'm wondering, are there $150,000, that being 2 firefighter positions, perhaps?
When we were going through this was when we had the workshop with the council on the paper performance plan back in, I believe, May. We estimated 150 based on, this is exclusively for paper performance.
Oh, okay.
This is not
Okay.
for any wage compression expenses that may come up. If they come up, they're generally going to be within the department's budget. The council did approve some wage compression adjustments in this year, and that ended up being part of the $200,000. And it came to about $50,000 of that $200,000 that we spent. And that was because of multiple years of our public safety supervisors and managers having not gotten a raise, and the union contracts gently bumping up against them to the point where, in some cases, the subordinates were actually making more in base salary than their supervisors, and we had a discussion with council about that. But that's not what's reflected here. As long as we provide across-the-board adjustments that are on par with the union employees, we won't get that problem with wage compression. We may have to make some market adjustments periodically, but I think as long as we're keeping pace with the market, I don't think we're going to have that problem.
Any other questions? If any council members do later on, make sure you contact the city manager or Mr. Noakes in the finance department to get your questions answered. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that was the only other account in operating, unless there was any other general questions. Or I did leave I jokingly referred to it as a wild card round, but at the end of the meeting, I did leave open enough latitude for the council to have a discussion on the operating budget if they so choose. The departments are here if you want to have any discussion regarding that, or we can just get into the CIP.
Go ahead.
I actually had talked to Mr. Roloff earlier regarding some of the budgetary issues surrounding the wage increases, pay for performance and all of that. And I was a little bit unclear, and Mr. Herman, you had mentioned you were unclear. So I had actually asked if we could by chance talk about that before we actually get into the CIP so that the citizens and the council is fully aware of exactly what that 2.5%, the step increases, pay for performance before we get into this, because there's an awful lot of need within that area as well as the multiple areas throughout the CIP. Are you guys okay with that?
Sure. Yeah.
John, do you have any information?
Oh,
No, John, John Fitzpatrick.
okay.
Do you have any other do you guys have any handouts, or did you not have it?
I don't have any handouts.
Okay, we'll just talk in general about it. You'll recall, Deb and I did have a discussion this morning. We talked about, we did the paper performance system. We talked about the three-legged stool, and the three-legged stool for wages include across-the-board increases. Really, the intent there is to keep up with the overall market. The step increases for employees who are hired beneath the control point that may not have all the skills that they've developed yet, and that's hiring them below market and gradually getting them up to market. And then lastly, the paper performance plan that was approved by the council previously. Those are the three components. The paper performance is the $150,000 that I referenced earlier with Sean, and that's the one. The 2.5% is built in, and the question that came from Councilor Allison Osby was, where did the 2.5% come from? When we talked back in July, we were very theoretical and just said 1% will cost this much, but we didn't get into the details of what ultimately was going to be put into the budget. The police and fire unions are each receiving 2.5% in 2013 as well as 2014. In order to avoid wage compression issues, the non-representatives have not had an increase since 2011, in some cases 2010. So the 2.5% was really to keep ourselves up at pace with the market. I had an opportunity to talk to Charlie Carlson this week on another issue, and I brought up the issue, and he acknowledged that keeping up with the market is a crucial component of that. So the 2.5% was intended to keep ourselves competitive with the market. Is that exactly at the market? Unless we want to pay Charlie more money to go out and resurvey the market, it's consistent with what we need to do to keep our internal equity going on with our police and fire unions. If we didn't, clearly they would fall out of place, but we also have employees who are non-public safety who are in the same category as our public safety folks. We want to make sure that everybody's moving. So that was the idea behind the 2%.
2.5.
2.5, excuse me, thank you.
Correct.
The 2.5. And then the pay performance I mentioned and the step increases, they only amount to, and I don't have the final numbers yet, but I know the step increase number. In the general fund, step increases only amount to about $46,000 based on step increases. We don't have a lot of people in the step range. It's primarily new hires that we have, and a handful of employees who were under the market at the time the wage study was done. That's about it.
So you're adjusting, so if there's an employee that is below market rate, what we determine now, or your department determines its market rate, they will get a pay raise to that market rate, correct?
They'll get a step increase, right, if they're
Okay,
at a step.
So we have that step, I think we all got the sheets a year or so ago, 2 years ago maybe, showed the step increases. So they'll get, like, if they're at step 1, they'll go to step 2.
Right.
And then and they'll get that at the first year or whenever they get their evaluation.
Correct. It's
Actually,
inflation.
the steps are when they occur on their anniversary date.
Okay, on their anniversary date.
Yep.
Then the proposal is that they, no matter, let's just say January 1, if we approve the budget, they'll get a 2.5% pay raise.
Correct. The
And their
whole,
step increase could be coming in July of 2014.
Exactly.
For example. Okay. Then they also will have the opportunity to get a pay for performance.
correct, and that's in January 1.
And that's not added onto their base salary, correct?
The only opportunity they have to put it on their base is if they've, as we talked about, we have a system that starts out at 87.5% and then goes up to market, which is 100%. And then once we're up to market, there's a pay for performance zone, 100 to 120. And in that zone, people have the opportunity to put that, if they get 500 or 1,000, those are the two options, or if they don't qualify for anything, they get 0. But if they qualify for one of those two and they're in that zone, then they have the ability to put that on the base.
Okay.
All the way up to 120, and then that's the maximum that they can ever get.
And that-
Unless the pay plan gets bigger through market adjustments.
And if you can refresh my memory, because it's been a while since we talked about the pay for performance plan, department heads are eligible for that also, and that's your decision?
Right. That's
Yep.
all non-represented employees.
Okay,
From-
so they'll all get, whether they're department heads or their employees, they're all going to get a proposed 2.5% pay raise, correct?
Correct, based on the way it's budgeted right now.
Okay.
Yep.
And of course, because department heads are not in a step going up the ladder, then they would only be eligible for a pay for performance.
There are some, if they're still below the control point, they could be eligible. But we have a good number of our employees who are already in the pay for performance zone or red circle, which is above 120. Those people are not eligible for step increases. They could benefit from an across the board. If they're red circled, meaning above 120, that would only be a lump sum. If you're in the pay performance zone, it would be built into the base. And then, of course, the pay for performance, the bonus is there if they qualify for that.
And then, I'm probably stealing a little of your questions, maybe, I'm not sure. But if we are not at market for new employees and we have an opening, are we adjusting the salary prior to posting that position for hiring to be at current market value? And is that, if so, is that reflected in the budget so that the money's there for that increase?
For the most part, we mentioned the equipment operator issue. That's really a public works issue. What we've done is we haven't adjusted the pay scale. What we've done is instead of hiring at step 1, we've found that we really need to hire more at step 3. And when you think about it, that makes sense because 2 years ago is when the study was done, and we're kind of 2 years behind. And a step increase is 1 year of service. If we'd been keeping pace, that person would be at step 3, or step 1 would be where step 3 is now.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Councilmember Herman, because that's a good example of what we were talking about earlier. That's one of the problems that can occur if we don't keep pace with the market. So it's an excellent example to illustrate, why it's important to do those across the boards, because that's one of the things that can erode our pay plan.
Right.
If we don't keep pace with the market.
And that being said, then are we adjusting the whole plan upward?
Yep.
So that some people technically, where red circle, could be taken out of the red circle?
Exactly. That's another purpose for the across-the-board increase, the keeping pace with the market, because as we know, when we did the study, we had a fair amount of folks that were red circled.
Right.
So they're outside the maximum of that range. And the only way they can ever qualify for an adjustment to their base salary is by the advancement of that pay range outward. So based on, let's just say they're at 122%, on the range, and our maximum's 120. So if the council sees fit to give a 2.5% raise, that's a bad example. Let's just say they're 124. The council gives a 2.5% raise, they'll just be eligible for a lump sum. But if over several years, there's a 2.5 and a 2.5, pretty soon that person who was red circled falls back into the range. And then they'll be at the maximum, and then they'll be eligible for an across-the-board increase that will be on their base. So we don't want to make that problem any worse. That's why they're red circled. That's why they're identified by that red circle. And they still get a lump sum, to be fair, because everybody else gets a raise, but it's just not on their base. But that's an important reason to keep pace with the market, because then they can theoretically at some point be back in the range just like everybody else. Once we correct that
How are we
problem.
addressing that in our budget? Because I know that we had $150,000 set aside for pay for performance, but are we putting money in there to adjust those salary ranges?
Yeah, that's the 2.5% across the
Okay.
board. So we do have that built in.
Right.
That assumes
That's the
that
2.5.
all the non-represented employees.
No, they're still getting a 2.5% pay raise, whether they're red circled or they're not red circled. But if we're adjusting the market for salaries and they fall out of that, and then they become eligible during the calendar year, where's the money coming from to pay them?
Correct me if I'm wrong. If they're red circled, they still get the 2.5%, but they don't add it to their base.
Correct.
They get a cash payment.
Correct, a lump sum.
Get a lump
And
sum.
maybe if I could take a crack at it, I think it's kind of confusing because there's really three components. And if you can keep those separate in your mind, it's easier to understand. As Mark talked about before, the 2.5% really just adjusts the whole structure of the plan. Don't think about it per employee, just think about it as adjust the whole structure of the plan. So the whole structure is increased by 2.5%. So that'll address some of those issues that we just talked about. If somebody's out here and the structure gets blown up, they can come back in. If we don't give them 2.5% a year after year, the people at the bottom end are going to can possibly get picked off and hired by other competitors because we're not keeping pace with the market. The more dangers on the lower end. So there's kind of two problems there. And then the other problem that we talked about with you across the board is that compression. If subordinates get raises and their supervisors don't, it starts to go up, and then in some cases they're making more. And then we have a hard time encouraging people to go for those supervisory positions. So that's kind of the across the board world. So that's that one leg. The other leg is the steps. And we try to hire people at 87.5%. That's the min. And we try to ramp them up to the market. That's our philosophy, our comp philosophy. And through time, the supervisors develop those employees until they get to market rate. But it's just a way for us to develop that employee and pay below the market. So when we give them that, when they get that step increase, they're nearing what market rate is. But really, we're paying below the market all that time until they get up to the control point. And then the third leg, as Mark talked about, is pay for performance, and that's just really a way to incentivize a performance culture and to incentivize excellence. And the idea is they get $1,000 or $500, regardless of where they are in the pay range, if they qualify and they indicate that they're doing a good job. So if you can keep it in those three categories, it's easier to understand, and I hope that's helpful.
But I think one of the things Deputy Mayor Herman pointed out was somebody who's brand new,
Yep,
just brand new hire, put them in at step one.
right,
They could potentially be eligible for a step increase.
yes,
Potentially, whatever the across the board is, it's proposed at 2.5. That's potential there.
right,
That's so that's 2.5% for a step increase, 2.5% across the board, and they could also potentially be eligible for up to $1,000. That's the absolute maximum any employee would get, but that's somebody who's below the market, and we're rewarding them and hopefully keeping them and earning their loyalty to us.
and that's correct, and the only caveat I would say that they'd have to be here a year for that to happen.
Right, they'd have to be a year, so it'd probably
For all those three things to happen.
really that wouldn't even happen until somebody's at step two.
So that's really how that works.
On the other
You
hand,
can't just get hired and then be eligible for all that stuff.
On the other hand,
The
somebody
second
who's-
year here.
somebody who's red circled, the most that they could hope for is the lump sum adjustment, if whatever the across the board is, as proposed, 2.5%, plus if they were eligible for a pay performance, the most it would be $1,000. Now, if the council gave less than 2.5, they would get less than that. If they weren't eligible for if they weren't eligible for a pay performance bonus, they would get nothing there. So it varies depending on how long you've been here. The farther down towards the minimum you are, there's more potential value just because you're moving up to the market as well as getting rewarded for good performance. And then it tails off the longer you're here.
And I guess, not to make it more complicated, but you may get these questions from citizens or anybody else, or for anybody that's trying to understand this discussion that's watching us right now. They may think, well, gee, can an employee get a 2.5% step and then another 2.5% across the board? Yeah, that's possible, but you got to remember that those folks that are eligible for those steps are below the market again. So that's got to be kept in mind, Once they get to their control point, then they're only eligible for the across the board, whatever the council sees fit. And then if they perform over and above, then they have eligibility for the 500 or 1,000. So, I know sometimes people say, well, gee, this seems like it's an exorbitant number, but I think it's important to understand the purposes of all those three legs as we talked about it when we designed this with the council.
The across the board does, I think, take into consideration, two things. One, keeping pace with some of the union contracts that have been going, as well as because we haven't done it for 3 years. Another circumstances might yield a different across the board recommendation, but I'm recommending 2.5 because I think that we are behind in the market because we haven't made an adjustments for a couple of years. Obviously, that council has to make that call. That part of the tough decisions. The across the board in the general fund amounts to about $270,000, just to give you some bearings. And I think that's important for the council to be aware of.
The 2.5.
The 2.5 does, yeah. That's about $270,000.
And I think that was really, that was the purpose of bringing it up, is because, we hear about this in theory, but there was no real dollars behind it. What are we looking at paying in pay for performance? What are we paying for step increase? Well, the pay for performance, but, the step increase and then the 2.5%. And especially with the majority of this components, it's not a one-time deal. So it's something that we're going to have to keep in mind that if we do it, we're going to need to be able to sustain it. Mr. Fitzpatrick and I had met yesterday, and he had explained to me he did a very good job, and I thought it was important to understand and put numbers to this because, again, we look at the CIP and we look at the operational as two different things, but they're actually very interlinked together because we don't borrow money and we don't do these projects for free, and the cash flow are all things that work together. The other thing, and this is for a different forum and a different discussion, but we adopted this probably 2 years ago, the pay for performance.
Or the pay plan in general.
The pay plan in general, and in one of the discussions that we had in that I had asked Mr. Fitzpatrick was, when it comes to this type of environment, are our supervisors on board? Do they have the proper training for this type of environment? Because this pay plan is not going to work unless we have the support system in place to make it work. Those are also things that I think we can't wait another year or 2 years or things like that. Are there tools that staff would need then to be able to do these things and to do them correctly and to make sure that we're on the right track? So, like I said, thank you for the number. That's really, all I was looking for before we got into the CIP.
Okay.
And just one final question, and we can get into CIP. On the market analysis, is that an ongoing thing, John, or is that something that, once a year you look at it, or how do we kind of make sure we're on the market?
Well, we took a general look at it with CPI, and we have a sense of what it is too. But a lot of it is driven by the collective bargaining that we have with the represented folks. As you talked about earlier, and you gave a good example of that earlier, you and City Manager Roloff. If we have represented increases that are at a certain level, we got to try to keep pace with that for the soups, or else that gap that we have established for the soups and subordinates, it just shrinks. So we do look at the CPI, but a lot of it is really connected to the bargaining process that we have with really police, fire, and transit, and our police and fire supervisors.
Thank you.
The other thing I'm going to bring up, and Deputy Mayor Herman and I discussed it just before the meeting, everything we just talked about has to do with city employees. This does not have anything to do with employees of the Oshkosh Housing Authority who are not city employees, who are not under the jurisdiction of this council, or, as the paper incorrectly reported, the city manager. They broke off from the city several years ago, probably more like 7 or 8 years ago now. There's been some misinformation out there, and certainly we want to clarify that. That's our employees have not gotten raises over the last few years. I'm sure some of them are a little bit jealous of what was reported in the paper. What was reported in the paper, I believe, may be accurate, but quite honestly, I don't know because we're not the housing authority. We don't have access to those records. So I assume that the paper did a good job of reporting on that, except that we don't run that show. So I just thought, Steve, we might as well take advantage of it.
Perfect segue.
Perfect segue.
Any other questions now? Otherwise, at the end of the meeting, we'll have a little bit of an opportunity to ask any questions about the operating budget. So why don't we delve in, since we already gave up a half hour of our meeting time for the CIP to get into the CIP. So
Very
right
good. What I'll do, I'm not going to get into a long dissertation because the council had a workshop on September 25th related to the capital improvement plan. And the only difference between what was discussed on September 25th and what's going on today is the limits under which I had to make some reductions from the capital improvement plan. What you have before you in the preliminary document that was dated September 25th included all the requests, but it did not include what was ultimately selected as projects for 2014. So the projects that you have in the list that I gave you just last week, again, it was after at the last week's work session. That's really what we're talking about for the CIP. So unless there's any questions, I think the best thing to do is just simply get into the individual capital projects categories. They're a little mixed up because I'm starting from a very general category that applies to all the departments, and the department heads are here for that, and then gets more specific as we get down to streets, which is primarily public works. So if I could, I got to go find my capital improvement plan because I grabbed the wrong one. Ed, thank you. Public property improvements, non-utility, start at page 26. And the total for that category is summarized on page 29. The total for that category is $7.3 million. The lion's share of that is the $6 million for the Public Works Operations Facility, which is underway. And it seems to be going well. We do actually have a time-lapse video that's available on our website now, and we can get that for you, but we're tracking how that's going. That's clearly the biggest one, and that's the next phase of funding this project. The last phase will be just the equipment and other minor things that will not involve the contractor. That will happen in 2015, but this will get us to the building itself. And once that's done, then the equipment and the major attachments that go in the building that don't necessarily have to be done by the contractor itself, that'll be in 2015. The next biggest expense in there, we did have this discussion during the September 25th work session, had to do with some of those areas that we've been allocating. The best way I can describe it is an allowance for different improvements throughout the city. And we base it on priority needs that can sometimes change over the course of the year. Parking lot improvements are budgeted at $350,000 for next year. That's the same that we budgeted in 2013. The roofing HVAC improvements of $250,000, that's actually been cut in half. We had been putting $500,000 in there, and right now the museum, all the work that's getting done at the museum, right now it's been closed for a few weeks. That was coming out of the the roofing and HVAC program. So we've got that. Other items in the CIP include the Great Neighborhood Initiative. Those are capital improvements that have actually been identified by individual neighborhood groups. We are continuing to grow that program, and the neighborhood associations have been very active in identifying improvements. They vary across the board. Mr. Davis can maybe get into a little detail of what some of those are. And then the last one I'd point out is the safety building modifications. I'd mentioned this a couple council meetings ago because we actually got the ball started on this one. We have a fund that we've established with the rent payments that we've been receiving from the county, and the police chief is making some facility improvements over there in the basement, and so that's funded. That's not any borrowing that's involved in that one. That's the general overview of the projects of $7.3 million. I can have any affected department talk to you about any of these projects in general or specifically if you have any questions.
Maybe just for the citizens that are listening on TV and on the radio, if you could, under the Great Neighborhood Initiatives, just one question I have is, you mentioned that the neighborhood associations have identified projects in their neighborhoods. Are the associations at all kicking in some dollars towards any of the improvements in their own neighborhoods? I know 2 years ago, I believe, we had a proposal of the playgrounds for people with disabilities, and there was a group that was going to try to raise dollars, and once they matched those dollars, we had dollars available. Just in kind of a Q&A, are the neighborhood associations trying to raise some dollars themselves to help offset costs in their own neighborhoods?
The short answer is no, but that doesn't do justice to what I think the groups are doing. I think they are taking responsibility for several improvements. For example, the one that was over at Bowen and CP, the triangle.
Yes, the triangle piece.
The neighbors are maintaining that. So sometimes the maintenance is more important than the actual improvement itself.
Well, I know we had community gardens in the neighborhoods, and they're maintaining those and obviously keeping those up. I just more or less a partnership, a public-private partnership.
Yes, and in fact, there has been some cases, the triangle and the community gardens, there has been private funds raised that we've leveraged on those types of projects. So yes, I would say there has been some limited contribution from the neighborhood. In some cases, they've written grant applications to other funding sources.
That was my next question of
Yes.
grants. And then we also mentioned improvement partners. Could we just identify the improvement partners? In the Great Neighborhood Initiative, it says, with Neighborhood Association, Neighborhood Improvement Partners.
Yes, those range from NeighborWorks, who really help us with the neighborhood associations. They've kicked in money on projects. We're working with the Oshkosh School District right now on another project. We've worked with the Community Foundation, and in some cases, we're helping write grant applications to, say, the J.J. Kellers of the world to also help on neighborhood projects. We also have a dream that we'll also be able to write applications for the Safe Routes to School type improvements and even additional projects on private property, which we don't typically fund, but a lot of things we do on the public side can actually benefit the private side, and we're trying to get some grant money to help on the improvements on the private side that kind of capitalize on what we're doing in the public.
And I think that's important. I think Councilmember Allison Osby and I had that discussion that we need to continue to identify our partners so that the citizens of Oshkosh know that we're not bearing it all, or the taxpayers are bearing it all, that we are looking for partners, we are looking for collaborations, we are going out there and trying to improve our neighborhoods, but not just on taxpayer dollars. We're looking for partners, people to get involved, to assist the city and the community.
Mm-hmm.
And so any help we can get in that area is greatly appreciated, and I think, I wish we could put more dollars towards this, but I know how tight the budget is. Any other questions?
If there are no other questions on that, I would suggest that the next one would be the public property improvements with the utility. That begins on page 30, and it goes to page 32. The summary is on page 32. It's $1,522,000. Several major projects, but probably the biggest one is the clear well replacement for the water filtration plant. There's the new vehicle storage building for the treatment plant. One that's probably the most anticipated is the Marion Road Water Tower replacement. Yay, this is the design for it. So the ugly faded blue will soon go away, but this is the next step in that process. And then one of the ones that you'll see later on is a discussion of Bowen Street. Excuse me, no, forget that, strike that. Walkout lift station study, we need to do a study with that lift station area, as well as some other minor improvements. Some are over at the wastewater treatment plant building, but some other replacement items. The facility's 35 years old, and it's showing its age, and we're just making some improvements over there. But the lion's share is the Clearwell replacement.
Just one question, and I don't want Mr. Potek to go into a long dissertation on it, but a lot of citizens might be asking what are the lift stations, or what is the purpose of the lift stations? Because we are spending $200,000 on the walk-call lift station. So just in principle, what does a lift station do as far as our stormwater or?
These are all related to wastewater. So
Waste, okay.
The system is designed to have gravity flow, but if you get to a point where we're a flat area, you have to use a pump station to raise the wastewater up, and then it can continue to flow by gravity. So that's what the pump stations are.
Good.
And one clarification, the Clearwell project is actually just a design project. So that is the actual replacements planned for 2016, but those are major projects, major design projects. Actually,
These are all design projects, right?
Pardon me?
Are these all design projects?
No, if you look, the vehicle storage is a construction, the Marion Road Tower is a design, the walk-off lift station is a study, the work at the wastewater treatment plant, actually the protective coating, that is work that will be done at the wastewater treatment plant. There's floor tile and carpet, that's a project that would be done, and then the roof at the north side project. So it's a variety of studies and actual work.
Dave, what do we get for $900,000?
You have to understand that these tanks are from the early 1900s that were under orders from the DNR. They're similar.
Why don't you explain what the Clearwell is? That might be the best part of the process.
They're a ground, and Steve can help me if.
Rescue Dave over here, Steve.
But they're really ground level water towers. Our water plant creates the water, puts it into tanks, so then it can be pumped into the system. As it's pumped into the system, it moves out to the water towers, but that's the storage right at the water plant, because we don't have a water tower at the plant.
But this is just to design that system?
The potential cost for that system could be in the neighborhood of $7 million. And we have, the big issue there is that these were constructed, there wasn't an issue in the separation between the floor of a clear well and groundwater. These are currently in the groundwater of Lake Winnebago. So it's not a straightforward rip them out, put new ones in. We still have to run the entire facility while we're trying to replace these, and we're trying to figure out ways that we can replace these. We're talking about over 2 million gallons of storage there. It's that mounded area that's kind of grassy. You really don't see or pay attention to it, but if you drive by there, you see a kind of moundy grass area.
Along Lakeshore.
Along Lakeshore Drive. That's all concrete underneath there. That's all water storage underneath there. So, and if you look at the CT basins we constructed on Washington, that was in the neighborhood of $7 million, and we're expecting to have to spend the similar amount of money on this. Very complex, because we're dealing with soils, groundwater, old concrete structures. There's a lot of engineering, there's a lot of study, there's a lot of work that has to go into these. It's not a real straightforward standard type design. So
We're really paying for the time.
we're paying for expertise, structural, soils, people investigating other options, specialty concrete work, options. There's a lot of very special, very sophisticated engineering that has to go into this. I know it looks like a large dollar amount, and it certainly it could come in less, but I wanted to have a substantial enough number there so that we could get all the expertise that we needed in order to make sure that we got proper design to meet all the regulatory requirements and that we would meet the storage requirements and be able to function.
If that's, I'll have one comment to tie in. If that's 2 million gallons, how does that compare to our other water towers? I think our other water towers are in the area.
Marion Road is 750,000. Ninth is 1,250,000. Furno, I think, is 1,500,000. So, the top structure of the water tower, we're talking about a bigger area than a top structure of the water tower that's sitting under those concrete structures.
Which is what I was trying to get at. This is a very large amount of water we're storing.
A good way to describe it is if we were a factory making widgets, this is the warehouse at the factory versus the distribution centers. The towers are the distribution centers throughout the city. We pump water there, and then we wait until it's needed. But the clear well is the last stop before it leaves the factory.
And the other thing, these provide storage for backwash water when we have to wash filters. And our backwash system, we use millions of gallons to backwash those filters during our normal operations. Just the pumps alone for backwash pump 18,000 gallons a minute in order to backwash these filters. And we have 4 dual media filters, and then we have the 4 granular activated carbon contactors. So we use this storage for a lot of different things operationally in addition to storage for distribution. So
I think what my question really comes down to is, okay, so it makes sense and I understand we're spending almost $1 million, but you said this is maybe something that's out for 2016, which is a $7 million project to build. So next year, are we going to have to spend another $500,000, million?
No, this is design. This is for the design of the facility, and the only additional money, depending on how this all comes out budgetarily, in how we come out with the actual design dollars, is we may be able to get some of the construction, engineering, and supervision out of this. There may be another portion of money that we need to use for engineering for the actual construction, shop drawing review, bidding, all those types of things. I think I have enough in here, but I'm not sure. Again, with these things, I have to estimate far enough out. And again, usually use in the neighborhood of 10% plus or minus with a project because we want contingencies in there. So if we're talking a $7 million project, potential cost, we hope it's lower, certainly. Take 10% of that, and we're talking $700,000. So that's kind of the rationale I used to come up with these budgetary numbers.
So this is our way of continuing our commitment to our infrastructure for our citizens in a limited budget environment, knowing that the public works facility is taking a significant portion of our real dollars for construction. This is our way of keeping moving on that process so that once the operations facility is done, we can move immediately on to other infrastructure.
Right.
And again, this is utility
dollars
versus
so
general fund.
So these will come out of revenue bond.
Right, this will come out of the
water utility.
But still, it does all go against the city's obligation, overall debt obligation. So
Yeah.
I know it comes out of the utility money, but it's still.
We'll borrow for this with revenue bonds as opposed to general obligation. We've got enough, because of our fee structure, we use revenue bonds for this.
But in that clarification I was going to ask, and so, again, citizens at home know, the debt service on this is taken care of through the payments that people are making on there. Okay, right.
That's what your quarterly
This
bill
isn't coming out of the.
Exactly.
That's
where I'm going.
Just a clarification, because this is a Wisconsin DNR kind of request thing, they're part of the survey group, so that they're step-by-step with us, or?
As we go through the design process, we submit, and we could possibly using a state safe drinking water loan fund as a potential source. But this is all submitted and approved through facility planning efforts, design efforts, and it's all approved by the department. So this will, just to kind of bring things full circle, this will get us completed with, I think, the last of our significant changes on that site that we're aware of. We're not seeing any big projects like this having to do with the treatment site storage or things like that. There may be some pumping station improvements, but, this really kind of gets us to where we've get everything completed on that site that we need to do. And again, these clear wells, some of them are over 100 years old.
And then the other question I had is with the Wacow lift station study, 200,000 for the study. I mean, is it something that, what exactly do we need the study for?
It says right there to review the capacity and the need for future replacement. That's an area where we have the town of Black Wolf Sanitary District. We have an expansion of the South Industrial Park. It's just an area that has had some capacity problems and needs analysis. With all the expansion in this area, we have to make sure the lift station has enough capacity to handle current flows and future flows.
Is that something that we can figure out in-house, or we have to?
No, the DNR does not allow
Doesn't allow.
in-house
Okay.
review of pumping stations.
I'm just trying to look for places to save money, Dave.
So that
They
being
require
said,
it,
it
so-
says the station is connecting point with the Black Wolf Sanitary District. Does Black Wolf pay us some money for?
They are paying based on their usage throughout the year. This study, we own the facility, so it would be our planning for our facility.
But they pay via the sewer rates. That
Right.
they have to pay the sewer rates just like everybody else. So that's where they pay their share.
And this goes in conjunction with that land use contract or agreement we have with them?
This is consistent with the growth
Plan that we have.
plan. Yes, thank you.
That makes sense.
The question that I have is on the north side lift station roof, the $11,000 there. Is that coming out of, are we borrowing for that, or is that something that we're going to pay for out of our roof replacement fund that we've been utilizing?
Because this is a utility, we take care of this through the utility itself. It's independent of that roof replacement. John Urban has plenty of uses for that money. He doesn't want to help to take care of the utility as well.
Other questions? Okay.
If there's not, the next section would be, just turn over a couple pages, the equipment. There's two categories of equipment, major equipment and then major equipment vehicles. This is on pages 33 and 34. The general fund portion of this equipment is covered by the general fund, with the exceptions noted. But the idea behind the vehicles, we pretty much have that covered through the $1 billion that we have budgeted in the general fund.
I guess I just have one question. And again, I've had a couple employees ask me this, why we keep buying 3/4-ton pickup trucks. Do we plow with those pickup trucks? Do we haul large equipment that we need 3/4-ton that we can't buy smaller pickup trucks at a little $10,000, $15,000 less? Because, 3/4-ton pickup trucks are pretty good size. They're just driving around the city. Do we need that big a truck that gets 10, 12 miles a gallon?
The Public
Go
Works
smaller.
Department has no equipment in this budget this
Okay.
year. So if you're asking that, you must be asking it about a Parks truck?
Well, there's a 3/4-ton CNG truck. It's water distribution.
That's a van.
Right. I guess in general, just, I see around town where, almost all of our public works trucks are, 3/4-ton vans, 3/4-ton pickup trucks.
Can I
there a need for all that?
comment for the
Sure.
utility? Yes, we plow. We plow out all our lift stations. We
Okay.
plow out our property, our facilities, any of our areas we plow. Our water tower areas, we plow all of those ourselves. We plow our own parking lots. So for us, we have those, and we do plow with, and that's both at water and wastewater.
Okay.
And we do have water distribution help us out sometimes. If we get large amounts of snow stacked up, they'll come over when they have a minute or so, and they'll load up some of their trucks and haul to snow dump. But for utilities, we do use those for plowing.
Okay. As long as you're here, Steve, jetter vac, what does the jetter vac do for wastewater?
Okay, that, actually, that's, the street division operates the collection system, but that is a replacement of a vac. Those are used for cleaning, maintaining the sanitary sewers. We have almost 280 miles of sanitary sewers that we need to maintain in the city, and that's one of the primary pieces of equipment that's used
It's
for that.
considered a combination machine. As it jets the debris out, it's also vacuuming it out. So the grit and grease and whatever else we're picking out of the system, so that we just don't push it further down the line and cause a problem somewhere else. We want to also vacuum it out of the system.
Okay.
What type of maintenance costs would we see on a vehicle like this, and what's the functional life? So if we were to push this back, it's replacing a 2002 Sterling. If we were to push it back 1 year, what would that look like in 2015? Or is this something that's completely at the end of its functional life, can't get one more year out of it?
If Kevin Ewan wants to come up here and comment, he left? Oh, he didn't stay for, okay. He was here for the garage, but then I would say they're making the recommendation based on the vehicle having reached the end of its useful life. We're trying, one of the emphasis with our sanitary sewer wastewater system is to keep cleaning, keep the program going. I mean, where we're seeing is less calls for blocked mains, less calls for emergency work on evenings or weekends or stuff like that. So it's a requirement actually of the DNR to have maintenance of mains as part of the whole system, including the wastewater treatment plant, the pump station, and the mains. That's this whole compliance maintenance.
Yes, the CMOM program that you've heard us talk about before. Compliance, maintenance, operation, capacity of sanitary sewers. There's elements in there specifically for cleaning, maintaining sanitary sewers, and we've upped our. We've been shortening the cycle on some of those cleaning processes throughout the city because we found that it's better for us to be cleaning certain areas more often than we may have been doing it in the past. And I think by doing that, we're seeing some of the benefits. So this equipment is really critical. And I would agree, though I don't know the condition of it. You get that many years on a jetter vac truck. They're like garbage trucks. They work hard. They get used hard. They're out there almost every day. And so it really is a critical part of the collection system.
Basically, under major equipment, it looks like there's just one major purchase, and it's that control system. Want to just, it's on page 33, Steve. If you just want to kind of explain, are we replacing our whole control system and whatever for the wastewater at the treatment plant?
Yeah, there's a number of components there. The original control system was put in '96, and that was the first programmable logical controllers and the supervisory control centers and things like that. And so we've been operating on those since '96. Well, most of those components are getting obsolete. We're having difficulty getting parts for them. We won't be able to get service for some of the PLCs in the future. So it really is time for us to upgrade that system. With that, we're doing some automation to some areas that haven't been automated before, and one of the big areas is the influent pumping. area. And that's critical for us, because when we have the rains and we have increased flows, that area, currently the operators manually start pumps up in that area. And we want to get that into an automated system, both because I think it'd be better, easier for us to manage the flows coming into the plant. And when the operators do that, they have to go down, that's 3 stories down. And we have an elevator, but if that's not operating, we've got 3 stories of stairs they have to go up and down in order to prime pumps and get the go.
So that equipment is from the 80s, actually.
The pumps are from the 80s. The controls part of it was 96 was when they were originally put in. And also, in addition to that, and in the influent pumping, we're going to be we're doing some energy efficiency projects related to that, and so we are going to be getting some focus on energy money. And then we're also upgrading our aeration blower system with 2 additional blowers that are going to be high-speed, high-efficiency blowers. And that will help us do a better job providing treatment. We'll be able to control it better and probably use less energy in doing that. And so this really all kind of fit together nicely as a package.
That equipment is from the 70s.
And that equipment is from the 70s. So.
Okay. So obviously, it's got a useful life, and it's worked itself out.
That's
Okay.
70s, 80s, and 90s.
yeah.
Just one final question. This is more towards the source of funding. $5 million of this budget is under the revenue bonds and $400,000 general obligation notes. May explain why revenue bonds?
The revenue would be for the sewer utility, so either the water utility, the sewer utility, or the stormwater utility, all, because they're utility, use revenue bonds.
Okay.
And that keeps it from going against the general obligation debt. So if you went GO with this stuff, you would be having a hard time borrowing any money.
And I will point out one thing. Since we've put this together, we've pursued the option of going for a clean water fund loan in lieu of the revenue bonds. We just classified it as revenue bonds here because that's typically what we do. But discussing it with Ehlers and Associates, the authorization that you gave at the previous meeting was only for this project, specifically what Steve was talking about, the control system, influent pumping and aeration blower. We're going to use clean water fund. We feel it's it's a cheaper way to borrow it. So,
And those are funds that the state of Wisconsin gets from the feds, and they're able to give it to communities at a lower interest rate.
So you'll see that coming before the end of the year. You'll see this borrowing come forward because about 1.7 million is already budgeted in 2013 to get the ball rolling on this project. This is the balance of it. All we've been doing is getting design work getting started, but we're going to be bidding this out relatively soon.
It's actually advertised now.
Okay.
We'll be
okay.
opening bids.
That's relatively soon. Thanks.
Yes. And we are in the process of reviewing the proposal for the construction services side of the engineering on this, and that will be coming, as Mark said, shortly. We'll get that reviewed at the council for.
Well, we'll be doing clean water fund loans because it's just a more cost-effective alternative and made sense to go that route. So even though it says revenue bonds, it's backed by revenue. It's a debt that's going to be secured by revenue, but it's clean water fund.
I have one question of parks.
Mr. Maurer is coming back from the State Wisconsin Parks and Rec Association meeting, at which time tomorrow he will be receiving the Wisconsin Parks Professional of the Year award. So I don't mean that to blow smoke, yes, but he's sacrificing because I'm sure there are people buying him drinks tonight that he is not receiving because he's here with us. So I want to thank
He'll be back before
want to thank Ray for coming back.
I just have a question. There's a proposal to cut 2 full-time staff people in your department, and you're asking for more lawnmowers than you got people.
The majority of the mowers listed are out at the cemetery, however.
Yeah, I saw that.
The Toro Groundsmaster is to replace mower, and I think that covers it. But the cemetery ones are mowers that have been pushed back in the CIP. I think we have pushed those back probably 3 years now. So we're now catching up to the other mowers that we had planned 5 years ago to replace. So the more we bump those back, the more they begin to stack up like you're seeing.
Okay.
We had a previous discussion about the kind of the functional life of these lawnmowers. Could you enlighten the rest of us as to kind of what we're seeing with these lawnmowers in terms of maintenance costs and the impact of our decisions down the road?
Yep. We try to get 8 to 10 years out of the mowers, and when we say mowers, they're also used for snow removal. So it's a year-round vehicle. We buy blowers and blades, so it's just not for mowing. I can give you an idea. After we talked earlier, or last week, I had Bill look at the cemetery under some of his repair accounts. Back in 2008, we spent about $3,400 on one of the line items. 2011, it's jumped up to $8,000, $5,000, $6,000. So we're consistently seeing those repair costs go up. Another line item for repair parts, back in 2008, we spent about $5,400. 2012, we're up over $8,500. So again, the more we push those off, the more those repair costs are going up. And then Bill took a look. Most of the hour meters on these vehicles or the mowers are approaching 4,000 hours. Again, they're used year-round because there's snow removal as well.
Mr. Mauer, the dump truck that's being requested, is that a new item that's not replacing an existing dump truck?
I'm going to have Chad come up on that. You want to come up, Chad? So it is a replacement.
That would be a replacement.
And how old is the dump truck it's replacing then?
It's a 99.
Oh, that's not the new one being, and I'm sorry, the new one being purchased is a 99 as well, or this is for a brand new one?
This would be for brand new.
Okay.
We always indicate the date of the one that's being replaced, so that's what that.
And this dump truck, forestry uses as well. Cemetery will use it if they're hauling soil, picking up larger pieces from tree removals and so forth. So we're using them cross-division. Golf course will use it out there for hauling certain product as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, everything else, it seems to note that it's a replacement for a certain vehicle. I just didn't see that here, but thanks for the clarification.
With the 2003 and 2004 lawnmowers, you mentioned earlier that we have a set replacement schedule that we were on. How far off from that schedule are we? And if these were to, because you have 4 on here, 2 from 2001, 1 from 2003, and 1 from 2004. How would it affect if we pushed 1, 2 of these back? How would it affect that getting back onto a replacement schedule?
Well, again, just giving the numbers that I took a look at from 2008, we're seeing those repair costs going up by $2,000 or $3,000 every year. So I would expect you would see those numbers continue to rise. And as I stated earlier, 2 of these mowers, probably the 2001s, were pushed back approximately 3 years already. So again, that's why you start to see the stacking. So if we push the 2003 and 4 off, again, we're going to see those repair costs continue to go up 2 years down the road if we continue to push those back.
Okay.
I would also draw to your attention when you, if you take a look at the preliminary document, we have all the out years there, and Ray has a large number of other vehicles and whatnot. So what he's done is he's prioritized his needs. This is a year for mower replacement, but he doesn't have as many mowers in the following year, but he has a lot of other equipment that is due up, and you're probably talking almost twice as much as what he's asking for now. So he tries to push it back, and we've pushed things back because of financial reasons. But page 78 of the larger document, mower, a Jacobson mower, 95,000, but the big one.
Correct. So 15
15 feet.
The real workhorse a deck mower, and then as well as some other items in there, mower blade broom, leaf picker, truck, grinder. So this is more of a year for mowers. And you can see, and I could take you through 16, 17, and 18, because I say no to Ray a lot, even though he's Parks Professional of the Year. I know he's Parks Professional of the Year because he still figures out how to do this even after I say no to him. So I appreciate that.
Just back to your original comment, Mr. Herman, we do have seasonal staff that operate these as well, so
I know, it's just giving me a hard.
that's all right. I'm not cutting the
Don't say
position.
anything bad about part-time
No,
people.
no,
Don't say
no,
that
I'm
at
there.
all.
No, I think it's unbelievable that we get that many years out of our mowers, because I know how hard we use the ones in the county system, so they're definitely due. And buying that many at one time, we probably get a better price from Toro or whoever we're going
Right.
with.
And the other thing is we feel,
John Deere.
and we can get decent trade-in value for them right now. If we keep them another year or two, we fear that's going to go down as well.
Just more curiosity than anything, are most of these like the zero turn radius ones, so that we can get around at the cemetery around the grave markers and things better?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. I know that's becoming the more of choice now for municipalities and that, because they can go faster and get around, stones and trees and things better, so. Any other questions? Thank you, guys. Go ahead, Mr. City Manager.
Okay, after major equipment, Ray may as well just stay right there, because the next category is parks, and parks, just give me a second. Page 23. Park improvements, thank you. Starts on page 23 and is summarized on page 25. The total for parks is $302,000. Want to make sure I've got that number right here. $302,000. Again, this a lot of limitations based on borrowing capacity. I tried to reflect as much of the priorities that were identified by the Parks Board. Ray makes sure he takes his whole CIP, his 5-year CIP, and has his Parks Board prioritize that. And so these are the big ones. There are some that didn't make it, that didn't make it in there, and but some of the big ones, there aren't major ones, but you've got Stevens Park, restrooms, shelter design. Originally, Ray had asked for the entire project, but given our financial abilities, we said, well, we'll get started with the design, and we can work on the construction in 2016. 24th Avenue boat launch, Bauman Park, that was one that was probably the highest project of the Parks Board. Rainbow Park launch improvements, that's really covered by boat launch fees. Menominee Park master plan upgrade, that is the zoo, that's donations. Park lighting, Row Park, that was a very high priority in the park plan. And then the perimeter walks for both Bauman Park and West Algoma Park were identified in there.
The one item that Mark and I had talked about after this document went out was the inclusive playground at South Park that Mr. Herman brought up.
Right.
And I would suggest that we do put that funding in here, and if we need to shift some of these projects around, I believe we're at about $50,000 has been raised. As you recall, the council had back in 2011 or 12 committed $100,000 and tasked the committee with raising an additional $100,000 before we break ground. We're at about 50. They have a number of grants out there pending, and we've actually brought Judy Britton on board since her retirement, and she is giving us assistance to knock on doors. So I think we're going to have some optimistic results here in the next couple of months. So Mark and I talked about this, and as much as I'd hate to, bring in a $100,000 project and then lose some of these, if we needed to do some shifting around, I would suggest we'd move the 24th Avenue boat launch restroom update back a year, as well as the West Algoma perimeter walk. So that would be about the $100,000 for the inclusive playground. I don't want to see that committee not have that momentum and have that money in the budget. So Mark and I talked about that, and I'm hoping that we'll have that money raised.
I was encouraged to hear, because I hadn't been hearing that the progress had been made, and then when Judy Britton's name was dropped, I was like, oh, I think they'll be a little more successful now. The 302,000 still holds, but I think recognizing that there's some priorities that may get shifted around, the idea is 302,000. Ray knows that that's his limit, but I would agree that if he can find a way to raise the funds for the inclusive playground, that has been a big priority in the park plan. I just didn't think they were as far along as I should have been.
Just one question, Ray. Under, the Rainbow Park Launch Improvement Site, it's the launch, and I know you're using boat launch fees. The boat launch fees can only be used for launch improvements, correct? We can't use it for, like, the 24th Street bathrooms at the boat launch or anything like that?
We could, Mark and I talked about this, we probably could utilize them for the restrooms. However, because of the number of improvements that we're looking at and the large cost to some of those improvements, we didn't feel putting it into the restrooms was the best use of that fund.
Okay.
So I think there's about $140,000 in that fund currently. So, we thought that using that for the actual improvements at the boat launches would be a better use.
Okay. Thank you.
But it's not a bad idea if we need another 20 grand to get the inclusive playground over the top, we might come back to you and look for get some approval for some creative financing there.
Are we limited? I mean, I don't know the ordinance specifically what the boat launch fees are. Is there a limit to what the fees can be used for in the parks? I mean, it has to be used for the boat launch areas, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what that is, whether it's bathrooms, lighting, launch improvements, things like that, as long as it has a connection to the launch area, the fees can be used, correct?
Correct.
If there are no other questions, the next category would be traffic, and traffic begins on page 21. Strong is here to answer questions about that. Modest program on page 21, summarized on page 22, $90,000. You probably already had an opportunity to read the details. Mr. Strong's here to answer any questions you might have regarding this program.
For coming.
I think just going to make a statement, and it goes back to Mr. Maurer with Parks as well. Finding outside sources of funding for some of these projects is cool. I see a federal grant for $5,500 for pedestrian accessibility improvements in the traffic, and we were talking about $30,000 for the zoo and $50,000 from boat launch fees, and finding other ways to finance things, I think is something that city staff has done a great job of. So.
Yeah, and not on the schedule too, but to Mr. Strong's credit, the bus shelter, there's some federal funds helping with the costs of those proposed improvements as well. So,
other than that,
how far along are we with replacing? I know we've started a 2 or 3 year project. How far along are we with putting all LED lights in and all that stuff with our traffic signals? Are we like 50% of the project done?
Well, what we're doing now is a replacement that we went LED about 10 years ago. We were among the first cities to do that with our traffic signals, and we're hitting the lifespan. And we were putting off replacing them. We were buying them because we knew they were going to fail in a fairly short matter of time, and that's been happening this last year. So the ones that have been really bad, we've been replacing. I'm not sure how many we've done at this point. Okay. It seems like at least half our intersections, though. We've gotten some really good replacement out there. And if you're driving around, the way you can tell is that the older ones, you can see individual LED pixels, and the replacement ones have a lens that kind of shields that, so it looks more like the incandescent ones did.
I'm just chuckling because since being on council over the last 3 years, there's a lot of things that I didn't notice before, and now that I'll add that to my list.
It's amazing what you become good at. Just amazing.
Yeah, you're supposed to go when it's green, not count the pixels.
Yeah.
There's no other questions. The next one would be the tax increment financing projects, pages 35 to 36, summarized on page 37. Total is close to $8.4 million. The lion's share of that is the airport business park development of $4.6 million, of which $2 million is the Economic Development Administration grant that we were recently awarded. So some other projects. This is one of the areas, as I mentioned in my CIP cover message, this is probably the one that got the largest cut, along with property improvements. Again, that's because of general obligation borrowing for a lot of these TIF districts, but we prioritize the projects, and Mr. Davis can provide you with more detail on where we are with some of these. Talk about shaking the tree for grants. Mr. Davis and his staff have done an outstanding job of pursuing grants, and I don't know what the number is up to with the Riverwalk, but it's
About $2.5 million.
so
And another couple of grants pending.
So you can see some of the projects we have in there. It's not a lot. There's only 5 projects. Airport Business Park, Boatworks Riverwalk. You'll notice that the Jeld-Wen site is not in there. We actually have a closed session with council next Tuesday to give you an update on where we are with that. But just for a variety of reasons, including financial, that is not in there at this time. That's going to get moved back. The Boatworks is a state grant that we have, and we want to take advantage of that. Marion Road remediation, that's part of the Rivers 2 development, which will actually be on next Tuesday's council agenda as well. $300,000 state grant for that. The railroad spur for the Southwest Industrial Park, that's the Allerton Drive situation. We're still pursuing what we believe might be some possibility for some outside sources, either grants or some other contributions from the various parties. That's going to be an ongoing thing for a while, but we do want to get that resolved relatively soon. But that's about Allerton Drive. And then lastly, blight removal for neighborhood redevelopment. I'm going to let Alan talk more about that. But again, that's part of our neighborhood revitalization program. Areas that we can do in the South Shore redevelopment area for blight removal, we have in there as well. Alan, I'm not sure if there's anything to add, or do you want to talk about what's not in there more than what's in there?
No, we don't even have to talk about, I could talk about anything, but just some of the highlights for the Airport Business Park. Some of the things that are going on with our partners were the county's also looking at getting money for extending the taxiway into the Airport Business Park. We've also applied to the Department of Defense Office of Economic Adjustment to develop marketing program for the Aviation Business Park. And I think the university and Aero Innovate are also working on funding the accelerator, the business accelerator that we're trying to also construct as part of this project. So there's a lot of pieces, and this is just one of the pieces the city has taken the lead on, but we have a lot of partners on that airport aviation piece. The Boatworks section is based on just the next logical extension of the Riverwalk. The Boatworks section ends there at the fishing pier. This would go through the city's property up to the Jeld-Wen property. It does include that bridge over the old marina. One thing I did want to bring up, since it's been in the news recently, the type of bridge that we're looking at would have that rusty look on the undercarriage of the bridge. It wouldn't raise up in the air, but it's going to be the lower section. It'd be very, very costly to actually paint a bridge like that. So this still assumes it's going to have that rusty type of color to it. But the rest of it would have the viewing platform and the benches and the lights similar to what we already have for the rest of the Riverwalk. Marion Road redevelopment area, as Mr. Roloff identified, that's for the section, we call it the Rivers 2 project. Alliance Development, Andy Dumke and his partners will be in at the next council meeting it's already been through Plan Commission for approval for the plan development. Staff was able to obtain some grant money from Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation for some of the remediation. We're also using some TIF funds to finish that remediation off for that specific site. And that'll leave 2 sites left to redevelop on the Marion Road River front. Mr. Roloff's talked about the rail spur on the Southwest Industrial Park. The blight removal for neighborhood redevelopment, that's in the South Shore redevelopment area. We're expecting that as time goes by, there's going to be more blighted properties that we're going to have to remove to spur redevelopment of that area. And as time has gone by, our community development block grant funds have actually been eliminated to acquire and demolish and blighted properties, so that's why we've suggested we put this in for tax increment financing in that particular district.
Just a question, Mr. Davis, on the Boatworks Riverwalk Bridge project, is that state grant specific to that project?
Yes,
Or
it
is it
is.
specific, it can't be used in any other form of the Riverwalk in that area?
It cannot be used in any other section. It's tied to the application we made to them about a year ago.
Okay, I guess my only concern, and I definitely don't want to give dollars back after we get grant approval, is there's nothing happening there though, right? I mean,
That is
there is
correct.
no project planned at all for the Boatworks. Nobody's shown any interest. No one has approached the city.
There's been interest,
Okay.
and at this point, we're trying to maximize the developable land that's available for that site, but I do think we're going to have to wait until the sanitation garage is removed before that has a real good opportunity for redevelopment.
I guess my only reason I bring that up is the talk of postponing the Riverwalk by the Geldwin property when we already have a developer in there and a developer wanting to do something, and we're going to spend all the money on property that nothing's happening on the Riverwalk. I agree that we want to keep it going because we did this section in front of where the foundation is and all that, and go south in that direction, but we also are going to do some work on the property on the other side of Jackson, correct? Or
That's what we need to talk to council about on Tuesday.
I guess I would like to see us continue to go for any grants we can get and figure out, because once you turn down grants or you stop applying, they start looking at other communities. We all know that. I think all of us have worked in grants. I worked with grants for a while too, and you really got to stay with them. And once you start getting them, and they see the success of what the grants do and what you do with the dollars, it's a lot easier to continue to get those dollars. And I would, we had talked earlier, just tonight, other council members talked about how important it was for the parks and that to get all those grants, and we've gotten all the grants for Riverwalk.
If you look at page 35 alone, there's just shy of $3.5 million in grants on page 35 for the various projects
But
here.
the comment, I guess, that the city manager made that bothers me a little bit on his general comments under business and economic development also means we'll likely have to turn back any approval for grants that we may be eligible for in coming year. While I do not want to be in a position we turn back grants, we have to recognize our limitations in borrowing. I understand that, but I just don't want to get us put in a position where we're out of the loop of obtaining grants.
And just to chime in on Mr. Herman's comments, funding is a huge component of the Riverwalk or any other economic development piece, but also there's two other pieces that are important. One is, do we have permits to do the next segment of work? At this point, I don't have any permits for the next segment. Likewise, I need to have permission from the property owner, and in this case, I have it through the Boatworks, but I don't have that through Geldwin in either case. So that's why it's we could have all the funding, but if I don't have the permit or the permission,
Right.
the funding's going to be stuck.
And is this, the grant, is it kind of a so-called use it or lose it? I mean, if we were to delay this by a year, is that $800,000 state grant either have to be reapplied for or not available for use in a?
I would ask Darlene if you could remind me how long we have left on the Boatworks grant.
2 years.
We have 2 years, so I guess we could postpone it 1 year and still complete the Boatworks project.
Mr. Davis, we also have to rebid the project.
Would you pay up the cost? Catch 20. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, the next category are the comprehensive street utility improvement projects. That's page 2, right at the front of the document after my budget message and the table of contents. It's summarized, on page 5, excuse me, page 6, excuse me. The total is $8,758,900. This, as you can see, is a more modest set of projects than in previous years. There's really two major categories. It's the Bowen Street reconstruction, and this is where you can start drawing on the large map that's been provided to you. The street projects identified in red are the projects that are in the 2014 capital improvement plan. We've got the entire 5-year CIP identified here. You can see Bowen Street is the beginning of a series of projects on Bowen Street. The reason for this, it's not necessarily the condition of the road itself. This is where you got to go deeper, and the construction of the sewers is really what's driving this. One of the advantages of this project that you're going to see later on when we get to utility improvements on the wastewater side is our goal is to eliminate the need for a lift station along Bowen Street, and we're going to be able to start the process to abandon a lift station. That's a very good thing because not only are you avoiding the capital costs, but the ongoing maintenance costs associated with the lift station. So this will be the beginning of that by starting on the Bowen Street project. It's important to look at the map in this case because you can see that Bowen Street's going to be done in several phases. The 2014 other northern part, Nevada down to New York, but then 2015, you're going to be down at the very bottom, south end, as it discharges into the, or it goes underneath. Does that where it goes underneath, over to the treatment plant, Dave? Bowen Street?
No, we actually have the crossing near, it's called the Broad Street Lift Station.
So it pumps over to Broad, it goes over to Broad Street from there?
Works over to Broad, and
Okay.
crossing there.
But you can see Bowen's going to be done in several phases, but the idea is to upsize and replace the main, probably more replace than upsize, right, Dave? On Bowen?
The main that is for next year is a large interceptor that would be installed.
Okay.
It is a major
Oh,
project.
that's because, and that's why we're able to get rid of the lift station, because we're going to have that.
That's correct.
So you can see that of the $4,378,000, almost 3.3 of it is just for sewer main. So that's the lion's share of the project. It's a very small length, but it's the sewer main that's the real issue there. The other project is the continuation of the project that was done here at City Hall this past year, where we were doing the detention pond underneath the City Hall parking lot, and that's what we now refer to as the Middle Village area. West Parkway Avenue, Ida, and Central Street are all proposed for reconstruction, limited parts of it, but this is the major part that's going to develop storm sewer, and you can see that with those projects, Central Street, it's $1.5 million of 2.7 is for the storm sewer alone, and then on it's also similar on Parkway and Ida as well. And then, as in keeping with our ongoing concrete repairs, we also have $100,000 budgeted for our concrete repair program. A lot more modest than in previous years, but this is probably an issue where quality over quantity is probably the overriding factor for these projects.
Do we have any flooding at the Bowen Street or the Central Street? No.
The central, if you look at your map, the central area actually, if the detention basin and the storm sewer that goes down Jackson Street is to help solve flooding down in the area of Division and Pearl.
Okay.
By holding the water up at City Hall, we're solving problems that are further downstream. As far as the Bowen Street project, that's not related really to a stormwater problem. That's a wastewater or a sanitary sewer issue. Because we have a large interceptor on New York that goes down Hazel, and by redoing this section of Bowen Street, the pump station that's right across from the fire station at Bowen and Murdoch is what the city manager was talking about, eliminating that pump station.
Normally, we spend a lot of time in this section, but obviously, we're just more modest this year.
Now, maybe the one thing under the central, our map doesn't show it, but there's one little block of Irving that will also have some storm sewer to connect to the storm sewer on Division Street and bring it back to Central.
It should also be pointed out that even though, as Mr. Patek said, it's primarily stormwater on West Parkway, the sanitary sewer on West Parkway goes back to 1892.
Which one?
Well, the one
West
on,
Parkway, the sanitary sewer dates back to 1892.
the one on Ida is 1892, and the one on Central Street is actually even older, with 1887.
Ida's the youngster, yeah.
Yeah.
Where's Steve Cummings when we need him?
Steve Cummings, yeah, we got a
I'm
channel.
pretty sure he installed that.
And similarly, Bowen Street.
Ouch.
Let the record show that was Counselor Deb Allison.
I made that comment, yes. Ouch.
And similarly, this might be a little closer to home for Steve, sanitary sewer, 1938, so that's 75 years old, so I'm not insulting you as much as Deb Allison Osby just did.
Ouch.
But still, sanitary sewer, that's where you see that's really taking advantage of replacing an aged sewer with a modern interceptor, which will help us in the long run. So, again, quality over quantity this year.
Mr. Roloff, just, if you can explain for me, I'm understanding the cash flow of this, but the city will borrow for the entire cost of the project up front, and then as the assessments come in, those are applied directly towards the debt service, or do they go into the, where do those revenues come in when we get the revenues from the property owners for
The
these?
assessments are billed separately and collected, and then it's sort of like a revolving loan fund of sorts for public improvements. So as special assessments are paid off, we borrow more, or we cash flow it for new projects. And so that was the issue with the auditors point out, that it was really important to get the bills out because that replenishes the fund. So that's how this goes. So you won't see a lot of special assessments this year because there's not a lot to special assess. So having caught up on those projects is really going to help us get a cash flow into that fund. And it's something that I have on the list for the new finance director because, as Mr. Noakes pointed out, and as Ms. Stino has pointed out, every once in a while you need to replenish that fund because, especially with as much as we've been doing in recent years, we may need to borrow a little bit for that fund, but for the most part, we do not borrow for the special assessments. It becomes a revolving loan fund of sorts. Is that a fair statement, Ed?
Yes. We just ran into kind of a cash flow issue when you accelerated your projects and you have a large number of assessments, and a lot of those are on a 10 or 15-year plan, so it takes time for that money to come back in. So thus, once in a while, you do need some borrowing.
How much are we going to borrow for special assessment? I couldn't remember. I know we talked about.
We aren't going to borrow, but the issue is should we borrow to replenish that funding? And from a cash flow standpoint, that's one of the projects I'm going to be giving to the new finance director because I think we need to know that. Peggy hadn't gotten to that point yet, but she knew it was an issue. And Ed refreshed our memory when he came back that, yeah, this is something that periodically the fund needs to get recharged, and especially with the aggressive capital improvement plan that we've done the last 5 years, we probably will need to do some borrowing.
When are you guys going to get us the numbers on that or for that request?
We'll probably be looking at that for 2015.
Okay, so not for this year.
No, it's
borrowing. Okay.
It'll take some time to get that all sorted out.
That being said, though, if we need to replenish that fund, there's currently money in there, or to pay that, or how? I mean, you said it's going down. I mean, so are we currently in a good position there, or are we in a?
No, I don't have the exact number for you, and that's part of the project is really get our arms around that. I would suggest it's probably a negative cash position right now, but all our funds together, pooled together, help cash flow that. But eventually, you don't want to sustain a negative cash flow in that fund because it catches up with you, and that's why it was pointed out. Catching up on a lot of the projects was a high priority for Mr. Podtek and his staff. So there's not much with the comprehensive streets, but that's it. The next category is comprehensive streets new developments. That's on pages 7 through 7 and 8. Not a lot. It really depends on the developers themselves. Cope Avenue, that's that street immediately off of Jackson Street to the east. That's going to be driven by development and by the property owners in the area. And then Edgewood Village, that's that area in the far north side of the city that has been languishing with, that has gone through some turnover with some bankruptcies with the development. Again, once it's time to go, that'll be funded through special assessments and through payments by them. It's there. I'm not exactly sure if we'll actually do it in 2014, but we have it there as a place marker.
But that being said, we have to fund it up front, though, right? Because it's an assessment situation?
Correct. And that's where I believe it's appropriate. That's why that's one of the first priorities for Mr. Chipman to take a look at.
So we would, in essence, have to borrow $1,094,000. Is that kind of where it's at? Or will we have the money capable of the money?
We'll cash flow it through the revolving loan fund that really the special assessment fund is. But as Mr. Noakes said, we need to take a look at that and see, do we need to begin to replenish that fund for cash flow purposes? And I'm anticipating if we have to do that, that'll be 2015.
Okay.
Really, as far as both of these projects, they were in the 2013 program, but there's been no movement by, as the city manager indicated, by any developer. So we're in a holding pattern.
Okay. Do we kind of stay in contact with the developer and let them know where we stand and where
actually
tentatives
in the Cope Avenue area, there's a different apartment building that's being developed in that area. But as far as the street itself, nothing's going on. Actually, it's more of us talking to the bank, because the developer, there really isn't a developer. It's the bank that's trying to figure out how to get a developer.
Because I know
Or
at one
banks.
time,
There's
I
two
think,
different banks.
on Cope, we approved a project that Mr. Schwab, I think, was bringing forward, and part of that agreement was to put a concrete street in there, wasn't there, with
He had never got to the point of having a developer's agreement. He had sold it to Creative Custom Homes, who then went bankrupt before they finalized their project.
So realistically, these are on our radar as a blip, but until actually things start to develop on these, we won't probably move forward with these projects.
Exactly. They've actually been, you looked at
Like you
capital
said,
improvement programs for several years.
Okay.
We're anticipating that, well, it's always been, the economy is getting better, there'd be an assumption that the bank would get a developer in there, but it just, the economy hasn't gotten good enough that the bank has been able to.
So that being said, how do we show that then in our budget, Mr. Roloff? Do we show this in our budget as dollars being?
The sources and uses say that we're going to spend it, but we're going to have it funded by special assessments. Cash flow is really more where you're going at.
Right.
And at this point, the special assessment fund will finance it. It'll show it has a negative cash position, but as people begin paying off, because of the interest rate we charge, we purposely have a higher interest rate because we don't want to serve as a bank.
Right.
I suspect we're going to have a lot of people paying this off because the interest they can get to borrow for these from a home equity loan or something like that, it makes more sense for them to pay it off and borrow through some other method rather than that. So we anticipate that we'll get a lot of people paying it off early, but that's why we need to do the analysis.
Okay. Any other questions? Anybody else?
If not, the next section would be the stormwater utility projects. These begin on page 10. Because we have a modest street program, and because of cash flow issues with the stormwater utility, limited borrowing, I think Councilor Clark can talk about this because of the discussions that have been taking place at the Stormwater Committee. The program for 2014 is $7,776,000. The two major projects for this are the Armory Area Detention Basin, of which we're receiving a $1.8 million grant for that, to offset that part of that cost. And then the second one is the Glatz Creek Relief Sewer. That's really to take care of flooding issues in and around the airport, or in the 20th Avenue corridor and going over to Lake Winnebago. And Councilor Clark is familiar with that, both from living in that area as well as being on a stormwater committee. There are a few other ones, getting ready for upcoming projects, Washburn Quality Basin, South Park retrofit design, South Park area in South Park, Fresno Avenue watershed, getting ready for that one, and then, of course, our $250,000 that we put in for mini storm sewer and storm lateral replacement. Those are a little more modest than in previous years, but two major projects. So we're still forging ahead, and that's about the limit that this can hold. And with this, I'm going to distribute something for you to take home with you. This is something that Mayor Tower had asked, and Mr. Potic was able to do this. Regarding rates. Now, this isn't the topic tonight, but certainly want to, for your reading pleasure, what this identifies is the history of our utility rates, dating back to 2006 through what is proposed. Gives you an idea. Our rates have gone up quite a bit. The combination of water, sewer, stormwater, and fire protection back in 2006 was $480. If the rates as proposed were to be adopted, our total next year for an average house would be approximately $775. So you can see that's gone up quite a bit. Combination, both storm sewer and water and sewer. You can just see the history. I'm just leaving that with you for purposes of absorbing that information, but we thought it'd be useful for you to have that. Again, stormwater, we've talked about the rates increasing, and Mr. Clark can talk about what's been discussed a great deal at the Stormwater Committee meeting.
This chart that he just handed out is a lot of what we've been talking about at the stormwater utility. Knowing that everything we do increases the cost. As other costs go up, so does the stormwater cost, and so making sure that we're cognizant of the burden that we're placing on our citizens.
What's the, Councilmember Clark, when these detention basins are being put in, and I guess Mr. Potic, you could probably help with this too, but what's the expected life on these usually, or at what point do they start to need somewhat substantial maintenance?
Well, you can come to the table, Steve. I thought detention basins, something like cleaning out, I think would be considered after a 10-year period of time or longer.
It's really going to depend on the basin and what activities are occurring upstream, but generally we haven't seen any need to do that yet. It's when the sediment starts to accumulate in the bottom and we end up with a depth of less than basically 3 feet of water up there. So in that 10 to 15-year range is where we're speculating to see. Again, it's dependent on how much construction activity really is upstream of the watersheds and
So the interesting thing is a lot of the detention basins we've built are in totally developed areas, so you don't have brand-new houses with a lot of erosion from that brand-new home. You're looking at stuff like grit from streets that maybe we don't catch in the catch basins that gets into the storm sewers, that gets into the detention basins. It's the leaves, it's the grass, it's some amount of debris that gets in there, but it takes a period of time.
But at no time, none of these ponds would ever be abandoned, correct?
No. Our intent is that now that we've developed a detention basin, we would then maintain it in perpetuity. You'd dredge out the debris, and then you'd have a new functioning detention basin or a properly functioning detention basin for another 10 or 20 years.
And I guess my question is structurally, I mean, these aren't just built for 20 years or the life of the bonds that we're getting for these. I mean, these are going to outlast being when they're paid off.
They should be forever. I mean,
they're going to outlast you and I.
We see out there are we have detention basins where we actually have to hire a trapper to remove muskrats so that they're not damaging the banks, that sort of thing. I mean, you have to be proactive in maintenance and watching your facilities. I mean, if there's erosion, you have to fix the erosion. If there's some sort of pipe failure, you have to fix the storm sewer. But it's a regular maintenance procedure on a detention basin. But it's intended to, as compared to like a storm sewer pipe, which maybe we've talked about in the past, where that might have a life of 75 to 125 years. Well, a detention basin, you have the land, you have it excavated, it's going to be there forever.
That cost then passed on to the utility to cover, or do you put that in your budget, or the maintenance?
The operating fund for the stormwater utility is responsible for the maintenance.
Okay.
And being on the proactive side of things, the street sweepers are already part of the stormwater utility to be proactive in that.
Okay.
If there's no other questions about the stormwater, the next one would be the wastewater utility improvements, which are on page 14. The summary is on page 15. It's $1 million. It's 2 projects. Now, we've talked about the comprehensive street project. We've talked about public. The property improvements that we discussed earlier with Mr. Brand are really the lion's share. The 2 projects here are decommissioning the pump station at Murdoch Avenue over by the fire station at Murdoch and Bowen. That's $300,000. That $300,000 will save us maintenance costs. Once we get that interceptor sewer and that in, we're going to start saving money so that we will reap the benefits of that. And then in keeping with our continued program on inflow and infiltration removal, another $700,000 in that program. And that's pretty much it. The lion's share was you've already discussed. With that, as we transition from wastewater to water, I think it's appropriate that I take you back a few pages to other utilities. It's sort of a mixture of both water and sewer potentially. So this is other utilities on page 9. There's 2 projects here. Both of these are upsizing and getting new mains in there. One is Butler Avenue and Pickett. This has been an ongoing issue. This is over by the Winnebago County Mental Health Institute. The idea is there's some private mains over there that they would like to get rid of and give to us, but they need to be upgraded, and we're willing to do it if they become public, upgraded and public. Is that a fair statement, Dave?
Yes. And that's an issue with some land in the town of Oshkosh.
Correct. And they would have to be annexed to the city, so there's a lot of things that have to happen, but if we can get the right ducks in order for this, we would get going on this project. But as you can see, this is assessed, and there's a portion of the utility, but a good portion of this would be assessed.
These 2 projects are actually in the 13 capital improvement program. They just were not completed based on not being pushed ahead by, in the case of the top project, by the state of Wisconsin, and then the second project on Stearns, it was a developer.
So we're just rebudgeting it. So I wanted to point those 2 out, even though we could still be having this discussion next year. I wouldn't be surprised at that. And then the last section is the water utility on page 16, summarized on page 18. Again, the property improvements were probably a bigger portion of water and the street projects, but there's 3 projects here totaling $868,200. I'm not as familiar with these as Mr. Patek and Mr. Godey, so I'll just...
They actually are both, the first 2 projects are projects that, again, were put in the 13 program, but due to funding limitations, the money being used on other projects, we had to rebudget them. The last project on page 17 is an area where it came to our attention some needs for water main looping, and so that was proposed as a project out in the area of Lake Butamore Drive, Riff Road, in that area.
Pretty modest program over and above everything else. So those...
No, we didn't put it on the list, but we actually have the sidewalks on page 19 and 20.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for... Unless there's any questions, yeah, thanks for catching that, Dave.
That's just a continuation of existing programs for rehab, replacement, or sidewalk that either gets ordered in or is put in subdivision. So it's a continuing program from many years.
That being said, there was a discussion when I was on the bike and pedestrian, and I think it was kind of a priority of putting a sidewalk all the way out to Logan Drive. Has there been any further discussion on that sidewalk section? I know some of that
Chris is coming.
deals with the town of Oshkosh. Has there been any movement on that project at all?
No, where it was left was the need to have a meeting with property owners to talk about different options that would be available. As was noted, there is this mixture of town and city parcels that makes it difficult. And from an ADA perspective, you want to be able to have people have a good chance to get off the sidewalk as opposed to mid-block where they go on a sidewalk and are assembling in the grass. So we developed some different options. But at this point, the next step would be having a meeting with property owners to talk through those.
Okay. But that has not been identified as a date of a year date, like 2015?
Correct. Yep, there's no date at this point.
This is basically, again, for our liability of the sidewalks, if there's cracks and things, they go around and mark them, and we replace them, and we have a subcontractor. And then the ones in the subdivision, is that a contractor agreement type thing, too?
We've had it both ways, where developers have asked us to include work, and if they have a subdivision agreement, they would be paying it off, or sometimes that work is just done by the developer, so it's a mixture.
So we don't have an ordinance or something that requires in these new subdivisions that they put the sidewalk in?
Yes, there is. We do have the ability, though, to, it's similar to the rehab. People can do that on their own, but we get the best price. They go with us because it's easier.
We're like the subcontractor for them, yeah. Okay. Any other questions, sidewalks?
That concludes the capital improvement projects for 2014. And our presentation for tonight. I'm not sure if there are any other general questions about the CIP, or happy to answer them, or we can just, if there's any other discussion that council wants to have.
Well, I actually have an item to bring forward to the council. Mayor Tower asked me to bring this forward to you, the council members that are here. He'd like to have one more workshop with just council, city manager, and Mr. Noakes to basically answer any questions we have, any suggestions for the 26th council meeting that we would want to make any adjustments to the budget, any changes in the budgets. He feels we should have a workshop, and he suggested either Monday the 18th or Wednesday the 20th. I talked with the city manager. He's not available on the 18th. With the 20th, say 5:30 to 7:30, that way any questions you have, we would not make any decisions. It's strictly recommendations to Mr. Roloff, Mr. Noakes on things that you may want changed in the budget, so that when the budget gets presented as a resolution, any changes and things would be then made on the 26th. It would be just a night of discussion, scenarios.
So we could give direction at that time, but the
Direction.
formal vote would be at the council
Correct.
meeting.
We'll
the
take
following.
no formal action on this meeting on the 20th.
Or would we be sending suggestions into Mr. Noakes so that he's...
Ahead of time, you could, or even that night, so that they have time to work on any adjustments to the budget, so that we, like last year, for example, for the two new council members, we had it, scenario A would change the levy to this, and this is what would happen. Scenario B, if we went with scenario B, this is what would happen, just kind of what we've done the
A
last few.
pre-final meeting.
Pre-final, but he feels with the fact that due to the work issues for several council members being gone, health issues, that he really feels one more workshop, hopefully all 7 council members would be here. Any ideas, suggestion, changes could be discussed that night, forwarded to Mr. Roloff and Mr. Noakes to make those suggestions. That would even give them time to probably get them out to us prior to the council meeting, maybe. They'd have to burn the midnight oil on the weekend, but but anyways, how do you guys feel? 20th, that's a Wednesday?
20th should work.
I mean, is anybody against it, I guess, at this point?
I'm not against it, but what does that do to just the public input process? I mean,
We still have the public hearing, and see, that's the part of it. The public will have input at the 12th.
Right. But
To talk about the budget, to give their input to each one of us. Basically, that will give us time to evaluate what the public has told us.
Correct, yeah.
And what they see, what we should, their recommendation of what we should do with the budget. And that, so I don't know, there would still be time. I mean, that would be a public meeting technically, right? Nobody would speak, obviously, but they would then have time before the council meeting on the 26th with the final budget approval to make any further comments. Because then the night of this, the 26th, we can make changes, we can make resolutions, we can make adjustments. So there is still time for public input all the way from even though the council meeting on the 12th to the council meeting on the 26th. Yeah. Even though we have that meeting on the 20th, there's still opportunity for citizen input.
It gives us a week to process what the citizens tell us, then us time to relay that to staff, give staff a full week, well, 6 days,
Right.
to prepare more information for us on the 26th to make the best decision possible.
And then, and remember now, we've had all the departments basically come in front of council and go over their budget and their priorities, and so if you still have questions of staff, you can contact staff, or you can go through Mr. Roloff, and he can get your answers, as he provided us some answers tonight. He provided us some answers from an email I sent to him, clarification on the pay raises and things, so I will, Mr. Roloff will notify the clerk that we'll have a meeting on the 20th.
And just one more question on that, was the 19th not?
The only reason he didn't look at the 19th was the museum has currently got a big gala function that night, and he felt that it wasn't appropriate for council meeting on the night that a department was having a
And I have a conflict
event.
on the 19th as well.
So he looked at Monday.
I know I've got something every night that week.
Yeah, we all do, I'm sure.
I have a conflict, the 18th and the 19th, but the 20th is going to be the night that works best for me.
If a council member cannot make it, obviously, 2 other council members aren't here for any input. If you can't make it, you can't make it. You know, it's one of those things, so it'll give you time to get your questions in, or, you know, to Mr. Roloff. I'm looking at it, and the mayor was looking at the same thing, a 2-hour meeting, roughly 5:30 to 7:30. We may be meeting after that. That's on the Tuesday agenda, so I can't talk on it at this point.
Would it be helpful for the facilitation of this meeting if we, Mr. Roloff, got some questions or some proposals, some ideas to you ahead of time? I mean, you've broken
Right.
out already some options and
Right.
what the costs are and what the
The mayor mentioned to me that he's been in talks with Mr. Roloff, and I believe between the mayor and city manager, they'll put maybe a mini agenda together. And any suggestions that you have concerning the budget, you know, whether it's potentially whatever, we can't, you know, we won't be making any decisions that night. No decisions will be made on the 20th. It's really just an open discussion of the budget again.
And you can also discuss this next Tuesday. We do have the public hearing on the budget next Tuesday, and based on that input, you might have some other things that you may want to say that you aren't even aware of based on the input.
Correct.
So you can certainly discuss this on Tuesday if you've got a fuller contingent of the council, maybe kind of clarify some things you want to have. I'll put it as an agenda item to as an action item. Yes, direct me to have the meeting on the 20th, and I'll put it on the agenda for you so that you can so everybody sees it even before they get to Tuesday's meeting. I'd be happy to do that.
All right, anything else any council members would like to bring up? Staff? Mark, any final comments?
No, I don't, again,
Any other staff members want to make a comment or two, where things are at? Otherwise, we'll close the workshop, and thank you for coming, and just a reminder to the citizens that on our next council meeting, November 12th, is the public hearing on the budget, and I know numerous council members made comments to citizens that have, get a hold of us, let us know where you want to, what you're for, against, or would like to see us do. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So